Mr. Speaker, the House of Commons has passed a bill devised by the leader of the opposition, who I see is not in his place, he's characteristically evasive, if not frit, Mr. Speaker. It's a bill that effectively ends the negotiations, a bill that demands an extension at least until next year and perhaps for many more years to come, and a bill that insists Britain acquiesce to the demands of Brussels and hands control to our partners. It's a bill designed to overturn the biggest democratic vote in our history, the 2016 referendum. And it's therefore a bill without precedent in the history of this House, seeking as it does to force the Prime Minister with a pre-drafted letter to surrender in international negotiations. And I refuse to do this, Mr. Speaker, and it's clear that there is therefore only one way forward for the country. The House has voted repeatedly to leave the EU, and yet it has also voted repeatedly to delay actually leaving. It has voted for negotiations, and today, I'm afraid, it has voted to stop, to scupper any serious negotiations. What this bill means is that Parliament, or the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, who is still not in his place, Mr. Speaker, and I really don't know where he is, he refuses to give battle, or at least to engage in argument tonight. Perhaps that's a sign of how he intends to pursue things in the weeks ahead. The Right Honourable Gentleman's bill. I'm glad he's now favoured the House with his presence, Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Gentleman's bill, amongst its other functions, is to take away the right of this country to decide how long it must remain in the EU, and handed that power to the EU. And I'm afraid it is time, that is what it does, and I'm afraid it is time for this country to decide whether that is right. The country must now decide whether the Leader of the Opposition or I go to those negotiations in Brussels on the 17th of October to sort this out, because everybody will know that if the Right Honourable Gentleman were to go there, were to be the Prime Minister, he would beg for an extension, he would accept whatever Brussels demands, and we would then have years more dither and delay, yet more arguments over Brexit, and no resolution to the uncertainty that currently bedevils this country and our economy. And everyone knows by contrast that if I am Prime Minister, I will go to Brussels and I will try to get a deal, and believe me, I know that I can get a deal. But if they, Mr. Speaker, if they won't do a deal, I think it would be eminently sensible for them to do so, and as I say, I believe that they will, then under any circumstances, this country will leave the EU on October the 31st. Mr. Speaker, it is completely impossible for government to function if the House of Commons refuses to pass anything that the government proposes. And in my view, and the view of this government, there must now be an election on Tuesday, the 15th of October, and I invite the Right Honourable Gentleman to respond, to decide which of us goes as Prime Minister to that crucial council on Thursday, the 17th of October. I think it's very sad that MPs have voted like this, but if I'm still Prime Minister, I do. I think it's a great dereliction of their democratic duty, Mr. Speaker. But if I'm still Prime Minister after Tuesday, the 15th of October, then we will leave on the 31st of October with, I hope, a much better deal. The Leader of the Opposition now has a question to answer. He has demanded an election for 2 years while blocking Brexit. He said only 2 days ago that he would support an election. And now, Parliament having passed a bill that destroys the ability of government to negotiate, is he now going to say that the public cannot be allowed an election to decide which of us sorts out this mess? I don't want an election. The public don't want an election. The country doesn't want an election. But this House has left no other option than letting the public decide who they want as Prime Minister, and I commend this motion to the House.
The question is that there shall be an early parliamentary general election. I call the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the second time I've replied to a Conservative Prime Minister seeking to dissolve Parliament to call an election because they didn't have a deliverable Brexit policy. Although I'm not condemning the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead by comparing her to a successor, she at least made detailed speeches setting out her Brexit policy, even if we fundamentally disagreed with them. This Prime Minister claims he has a strategy, but he can't tell us what it is. The bigger problem for him is that he hasn't told the EU what it is either. And at Prime Minister's question time today, as with the statement yesterday, he was unable to say whether he's even made any proposals whatsoever to the EU. And it's basically a policy that's cloaked in mystery, like the Emperor's new clothes. There really is absolutely nothing there. And the naked truth is that the reality is deeply unpalatable. A disastrous no-deal Brexit to take us into the arms of a trade deal with Donald Trump that will put America first and Britain a distant second. The Prime Minister knows there is no mandate for no deal, no majority support for it in the country, and no majority for it in this House. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, the co-convener of the Vote Leave campaign, said in March this year, "We didn't vote to leave without a deal." Even the leaders of the Leave campaign are absolutely clear that the referendum confirmed no mandate for no deal. No deal. No deal. No deal. No deal is opposed by every business group, every industry body, every trade union, and by this House, as today's votes and others have shown. Mr. Speaker, we want an election, so we look forward to turfing this government out. And
does the Leader of the Opposition want a general election? A yes or no will suffice.
Well, he obviously didn't hear what I just said. I was about to point out, before I was gently interrupted by the honourable member, that the offer of the election today is a bit like the offer of an apple to Snow White and the Wicked Queen, because what he's offering is not an apple or even an election, but the poison of a no deal. So, Mr. Speaker, I repeat what I said last night. Let this bill pass and gain royal assent, then we will back an election so we do not crash out with a no-deal exit from the European Union. And so, it's the anti-democratic instincts of this government that cause us concern. Despite the expressed will of the House to support the bill debated today, the Conservative peers, their colleagues in the Lords, have tabled 92 amendments for debate. I really doubt this is motivated by a desire to improve the legislation, not a bit of it, but to filibuster it. An undemocratic cabal in Downing Street, aligned with an undemocratic and unelected House to override the democratic will of this House expressed in the bill that we have just given a third reading to. If they can't win the argument, they try to shut down debate. We had the Prime Minister deciding to prorogue Parliament in August, and today he wants to dissolve Parliament to shut down scrutiny. He cannot handle dissent. He cannot handle dissent and debate in his own party, and has extraordinarily expelled 21 of his own MPs who voted against him last night. The hypocrisy of this process is phenomenal. From a Prime Minister who twice voted against the last Prime Minister's Brexit plans. A general election isn't a plaything for a Prime Minister to avoid his obligations, to dodge scrutiny or renege on commitments. He is committed to renegotiate Brexit. But where is it? Where is the plan? Where are the proposals? if he has a Brexit plan, be it no deal or the new mystery proposal deal that we've yet to see any information of, then he should put it before the public in a public vote, a referendum or a general election, and seek a mandate for them. Let the Prime Minister go to Brussels tomorrow and ask for an extension so that he can seek a mandate for his unknown Brexit plan and put it before the people. The truth, Mr. Speaker, is that this motion from the Prime Minister is about playing a disingenuous game that are unworthy of his office. I look forward to the day his government and his party and all their austerity and misery they've heaped on this country are turfed out of office, and we prevent this country crashing out on the 31st of October with all the damage he knows, because he's already seen the documents, it will do to people's lives and job prospects in this country. It's a cynical movement from a cynical Prime Minister.
Mr. Kenneth Clarke.
Well, I don't know whether the House wants a debate. I'll be very brief. I was going to join in if other people were going to debate, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for encouraging me. No doubt the deep distress of everybody else waiting to have an important vote. I merely say that I found these exchanges quite predictable. They've been well rehearsed before we took place. I do think the Prime Minister, with the greatest respect, has a tremendous skill in keeping a straight face whilst he's being so disingenuous. The fact is, he's now desperate to have an election in order to bring this House's proceedings to an end and to have the general election clearly before October the 31st. And he's obviously going to campaign before that on the basis that he's been thwarted in getting an amazing beneficial deal for this country, which is actually being blocked by wicked continental politicians and by politicians and the MPs in the House of Commons who have no sense of the true national interest, which is to keep him in power. It's wrong to say that the opposition to him is trying to reverse the referendum. A very large percentage of those who've been defeating him in the last 2 days are prepared to vote for Brexit. They voted for Brexit more often than he has. He caused delay in March and he caused delay in April, but we wish to do so on satisfactory and reasonable terms. We now have a bill which is the beginning of a pathway to actually give us more time for grown-up, sensible, diplomatic exchanges between countries. The idea that on the European Union they're refusing us a deal because they really think they're going to trap us in permanently is nonsense. They're desperate to get a deal, but of course they're desperate to get a deal, but not so desperate that they're going to accept terms which will cause chaos in Northern Ireland, politically and economically, and will shatter the normal rules which hold together the single market and the customs union upon which they are based. The Prime Minister has thrown down dramatic conditions which he must know make any sensible negotiations pointless unless he changes his direction. He's now Prime Minister. He's now a responsible politician with huge responsibility. I urge him one last time to stop treating all this as a game and to use the time to actually get a serious resolution of these impossible problems to look after the future goodwill of this country, keeping us in a proper, no doubt different relationship with our partners on the continent, and in particular keeping our economic and trading relationships intact, because they're essential for the future of our children and grandchildren.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate with all my heart the Right Honourable Member for Rushcliffe, who, I have to say, as he has done on many occasions when I've followed with him, spoken with great sense. And I have to say to the Prime Minister, I'll give you a piece of friendly advice, Prime Minister. Sack your advisor, Dominic Cummings, and bring in the Right Honourable Member for Rushcliffe that might actually be able to give you some sensible advice. You know, Mr. Speaker, we're having this debate tonight quite simply because the Prime Minister's been defeated. That's the reality. And my question to the Prime Minister is, this House is supposed to be sovereign in his eyes. Accept the will of this House. Accept the bill that Parliament has passed accept your duty as Prime Minister and go to the European Council on the 17th of October and negotiate the extension that you've now been told to deliver. Mr. Speaker, yet again this government has been defeated by a majority in the House of Commons against a no-deal Brexit. The passage of the bill tonight to block no deal is a victory, not just for democracy, but yes, for common sense. And I pay tribute to the members of Parliament across these benches who've worked tirelessly to build consensus for this legislation to pass and remove the cliff edge catastrophe. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister shouldn't be talking about surrender. He should be congratulating members of Parliament that have stood up for all our national interests. And really, what a disgrace for a Prime Minister to accuse parliamentarians, decent parliamentarians, of surrender. It simply lacks dignity, Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, now Parliament has once again displayed its will. The Prime Minister must show respect for democracy and agree to abide by the will of Parliament on the bill blocking no deal.
Calm down, Boris.
Look, if you wish to intervene rather than shouting at me, I will give you the courtesy that you didn't applaud me. If you would like to rise.
I've been listening to the Honourable Gentleman with great care, but the one thing that he doesn't say in all of this, that the reason he has voted tonight for this bill is because he and his party are adamantly opposed to ever delivering Brexit. So will he now admit on his feet that that is his purpose and that is the purpose of this bill?